Miguel, now surrounded by an aura of renewed hope, faces a crucial moment of choice. A door opens to a universe of possibilities, and the question hangs in the air. How far is your faith capable of taking you? Get ready to discover the answer as the narrative unfolds in surprising fashion. In a scenario where the dawn poured out in intense hues and the night shadows gave way to a new light, Miguel found himself on the verge of an unexpected new beginning. After the revealing stage of pain, overcoming, and encounters that marked his previous journey, the young man awakened to a universe full of possibilities. The environment around him, once gray and oppressive, gradually transformed into a vibrant and colorful canvas, where every detail carried the promise of renewal and discovery. At that moment, the city streets, the murmurs of old buildings, and even the whispering wind seemed to conspire to herald a new cycle. One day, after a period markedly closed in introspection, Miguel decided to leave behind the old fears and accept that the new beginning is a gift that comes even when all seems lost. When he left his home, which until then had been his sanctuary of reflections and uncertainties, he realized that the world was restarting, not only in the daily cycle of the sun and moon, but also in the intimate breath that reimagines the life of each individual. The first rays of the sun bathed the streets in a silvery light, shining in the puddles that the rain had left behind and illuminating the remnants of a past that now dissolved in the morning breeze. As he walked, Miguel felt his heart beating with renewed intensity, as if each beat announced the beginning of a trajectory full of hope. In the midst of the rediscovery of colors and sounds, every detail of his surroundings seemed to carry messages of encouragement. The carefree laughter of children who played carefree in a park, the soft touch of friendly hands in the reunion with old acquaintances, and the spontaneous reports of strangers who, with a complicit look, gave him back his faith in better days. All these small signs were like points of light on a vast map that led him to a destination where fear gave way to courage. Miguel stopped in front of a square full of centennial trees where newborn leaves danced in the wind. There, feeling an inexplicable connection with nature, he allowed himself to close his eyes for a few moments, absorbing every sound and smell of the environment. In this state of deep connection, a feeling of lightness was established. It was as if all the scars of his soul began to heal, and hope, once tenuous, gained shape and consistency. This experience became a sacred rite of passage, the moment when the new beginning ceased to be just an abstract idea and became a palpable reality. Then, Miguel decided to enter an old cultural gallery, a space for artistic coexistence where the diversity of feelings and the beauty of transformation were celebrated. Within that environment, full of works that mixed the contemporary with the historical, he felt as if each brushstroke on the canvases and each sculpture was impregnated with the energy of new beginnings. The artistic expressions seemed to dialogue with their own experience, bringing to light the idea that each of us has the power to reinvent our own history. As he looked at a painting depicting a butterfly emerging from its cocoon, he interpreted it as a perfect metaphor for his own metamorphosis, the transition from a time of darkness to an age of light, where the past does not define the future, but enriches each new step taken. In this space of cultural effervescence, Miguel also had the opportunity to meet friends and family who, despite the differences of opinions and paths traveled, showed a sincere joy for his return to life with all the vigor that seemed to have been renewed internally. The spontaneous dialogues and the smiles shared provoked in him a sense of belonging. He saw, in the faces and in the welcoming words, the confirmation that personal reconstruction does not have to be solitary, but can be a collective celebration of life. This communion of feelings reinforced the idea that a new beginning was possible when one opened one's heart to welcome both painful experiences and lessons learned, allowing oneself the chance of a new chapter. Gradually, Miguel began to engage in activities that strengthened his spirit and clarified his worldview. She enrolled in writing and meditation workshops, in which she found space to express her anxieties and dreams with authenticity. These experiences allowed him to find a new inner voice, a voice that was no longer silent in the face of challenges, but that rose to transform every obstacle into a lesson in wisdom. In each encounter, in each exercise of self-knowledge, the young man experienced the magic of a new beginning, realizing that, by searching within himself for the hidden good, he could transform chaos into harmony and uncertainty into a beautiful promise of the future. With each passing day, Miguel found himself emerging from the shadows that resided in him and projecting himself towards a horizon of infinite possibilities. The new beginning, which before seemed to be just a cliché or a distant fantasy, gained real contours in her life. He learned that, in order to start over, it is not necessary to erase the past, but rather to recognize that each memory, each scar, is part of a journey that brought him to that exact moment. This understanding allowed him to embrace the duality of existence, where pain and joy coexist side by side and transform into each other, contributing to the complex yet beautiful tapestry of his identity. In the silence that followed the intense moments of the reunion with the new, Miguel sat on a bench in a square and let his thoughts fly freely. Among the trees, the sound of birds, and the gentle warmth of the sun, he meditated on the meaning of the new beginning, not just as an external change, but as a profound internal revolution. With a light heart and an open mind, he understood that each new beginning is an invitation to be true to himself, to dare to rewrite his history with the vibrant ink of hope and renewed faith. Thus, in a subtle harmony of action and contemplation, Miguel emerged from the ashes of the past and embraced the grandeur of a new dawn. His unexpected restart was not only the beginning of a new day, but the harbinger of a lifetime of discoveries, encounters, and transformations. A cycle where the essence of the being is reconfigured with each pulse of time and resonates, finally, with the symphony of full existence. At the dawn of this new chapter, the environment was impregnated with an almost tangible atmosphere of internal transformation. Miguel, bearing the marks of a troubled past, was faced with the imperative need to forgive, not only others, but especially himself. On an afternoon, painted with the soft hues of the sunset, he walked through the streets that now seemed to reflect the rhythmic rhythm of his changing heart. Each step echoed the hope that forgiveness was the key capable of converting sorrows into learning and reconciliation, an invitation to be reborn in the midst of adversity. Upon arriving at an old urban park, surrounded by centennial trees that silently kept stories of overcoming and resilience, Miguel stopped in front of a large oak tree, whose imposing crown seemed to offer shelter to all the stories of pain and love he had ever lived. Sitting next to a spring of crystal-clear water, he recalled intense moments of conflict, heated arguments, and resentments that deeply wounded his soul. Every drop that fell from the fountain seemed to follow the rhythm of his memories, slowly washing away the traces of bitterness that, for so long, prevented his true essence from revealing itself in its fullness. At that very moment, a group of people gathered, in a circle, engaged in a ritual of sharing and meditation, caught Miguel's attention. Observing from afar, he realized that in that environment, the silence of the gestures and the softness of the gazes created an atmosphere of subtle reconciliation, where each person seemed, in communion, to free himself from invisible burdens. Inspired by this scene, he decided to get closer, feeling that there he could find answers to the complexity of his feelings. When he joined the group, he was welcomed with a kindness that made him realize that forgiveness is not a burden to be borne, but a gift to be received, like a tender embrace that heals wounds and reconnects fragmented souls. The word forgiveness took on a new meaning that afternoon. During a conversation circle, a woman with a soft voice shared how the act of forgiving had transformed her life. When we forgive, we free up a space within us for love to reign. Forgiveness does not erase the past, but transforms it into a life lesson that makes us more human. These words echoed in Miguel's heart, awakening in him a silent determination to leave behind the resentments that weighed him down. He vividly recalled the last violent fight with a dear family member, a painful episode where sharp words cut deep and silence settled like an insurmountable wall. In that shared account, Miguel found the courage he lacked to recognize that forgiveness does not diminish the pain suffered. On the contrary, it allows you to transform this pain into vital energy to start over. He came to see reconciliation not as a concession of weakness, but as a gesture of inner strength that requires humility and, above all, the courage to strip away the hurts of the past to embrace a lighter and more harmonious future. Moved by this new vision, Miguel decided to resume contact with the relative with whom he had experienced intense disagreements. In a meeting marked by a mixture of anxiety and hope, the two had a coffee in a small, cozy coffee shop where the aroma of ground beans and the warmth of intimate conversations created an environment conducive to the opening of the heart. During that sincere dialogue, between suppressed tears and shy smiles, he allowed himself to listen and share the sorrows that once separated them. Each sincere word was like a brick removed from the wall that isolated them, revealing the fragility and, at the same time, the beauty of the vulnerable human being. The reunion, marked by long, silent pauses that carried the intensity of emotions, transformed the tension into a feeling of relief and peace. It was as if, at every moment, the transparency of love imposed itself on the hardships of the past, allowing both to rediscover themselves in empathy and understanding. In that atmosphere of reconciliation, Michael experienced the cathartic force of genuine forgiveness. Acknowledging his own faults and accepting remorse for what could not be changed allowed him to rebuild bridges that had long since crumbled. Gradually, he learned that forgiveness is, above all, an act of love, not directed only to the other, but mainly to himself. Freed from the shackles of resentment, his soul opened up to new possibilities, inviting him to rewrite the chapters of his existence with the ink of compassion. This experience made him understand that reconciliation is a path that is built on the basis of acceptance, the courage to look inward, and the willingness to turn suffering into a valuable lesson. At the end of that transformative day, Miguel left the coffee shop with a light heart and a mind full of new hope. He understood that in order to move forward, it was necessary to rescue his own essence, allowing each act of forgiveness to become a firm step towards the integration of his emotions. The environment, which for so long had been dominated by the shadows of past conflicts, was now illuminated by the clarity of sincere forgiveness and the joy that is born of true reconciliation. The experience of that reunion, full of deep feelings and full of small gestures of humanity, would forever be a milestone in Miguel's trajectory, who envisioned a future in which love and forgiveness intertwined to form the basis of a genuinely full and serene life. In this process of transformation, each breath was an act of liberation, and each gesture of mercy, a concrete proof that the force of forgiveness is capable of transmuting traumas into bridges for a new dawn. Thus, with the conviction that forgiveness is the essence of sanity and evolution, Miguel headed towards a destination where reconciliation was not just an isolated act, but a continuous journey of love and overcoming, capable of illuminating the darkest paths and revealing, in the depths of each being, the universal truth that to love and forgive is, definitely, an act of courage and freedom. After transcending the shadows of the past and finding strength in each new dawn, Miguel begins a journey of building a legacy that goes beyond mere spiritual experience. It is the materialization of a faith transformed into an example. In the midst of encounters that seem to have been orchestrated by fate itself, the young man understands that his mission is to sow the flame that once lit his heart, so that others can also find in their own corners the necessary strength to fight and believe. As he walks through streets that now tell stories of reconstruction, Miguel begins to record his experiences in diaries and letters, transforming each account into a testimony for future generations. Through sincere meetings in conversation circles and impromptu lectures in squares illuminated by the sunset, he shares stories of overcoming that are intertwined with the essence of God-only God. Their accounts are not restricted to moments of glory, but address the daily struggle, the shared pain, and the silent strength present in each new beginning. This transparency in his words inspires people of different ages to believe that faith is not measured by the spectacular miracle, but by the ability to transform one's own life into a palpable example of resilience and love. Miguel organizes small meetings in communities where art and sharing become instruments of reconciliation. In one of these moments, he visits a public school where the innocence and curiosity of children awaken in him the memory of his own childhood. There, with vibrant colors traced on murals and poems handwritten with the ink of hope, the message spreads. Faith is a legacy that surpasses the barriers of time and condition, forging bonds between generations. Each story told, each tear that turns into laughter, reinforces the certainty that personal experience can be converted into a source of light for those who still seek their way. At the same time, Miguel discovers in himself a vocation for teaching, dedicating himself to transmitting knowledge, not only religious, but also self-knowledge and love for others. He starts to bring together study groups in simple houses, where the exchange of experiences becomes a ritual of collective healing. By detailing his own emotional scars and the lessons learned along the journey, he invites those present to rewrite their stories with the same fervor, stating that each difficulty overcome is a brick placed in the construction of an unshakable faith. Miguel's legacy is not limited to words. It is reflected in concrete solidarity actions, in the supports provided to the most vulnerable, in collaboration with community centers, and in the organization of events that promote social inclusion. This daily practice reinforces the idea that true faith is authentic and alive, nourished by a commitment to the good and the certainty that when love becomes action, it is perpetuated through time. Thus, when looking back, Miguel sees the narrative of his own transformation as a lineage of light that now extends to illuminate the paths of many who seek to rescue the lost essence. His legacy is proof that when faith is cultivated with dedication and courage, it becomes a valuable heritage, capable of transcending individual life and echoing in the history of all those who wish to transform the world with love and compassion. In a twilight full of promise and uncertainty, Miguel is faced with the most challenging confrontation of his journey, the tests imposed by fate, which emerge not as accidents, but as deliberate tests for the strengthening of his faith and character. By abandoning the refuge of reunions and inner consolidation, he finds himself faced with the rawness and ambiguity of existence, immersed in a reality that reveals itself to be multifaceted and sometimes painful. In that decisive period, the sky was dressed in dense clouds and a shade of gray that seemed to reflect Miguel's own internal dilemmas. Through the city's narrow, labyrinthine streets, where worn stones carry tales of ancestral struggles, he advances with hesitant steps, each narrating his own silent saga. At the same time that he senses the tension in the air, Miguel feels the pulse of his fears and uncertainties vibrate in the depth of his being. The feeling is as if the entire universe conspires to test your resolve. During these turbulent days, seemingly fortuitous events begin to happen. Small crises, enigmatic coincidences, and encounters with enigmatic figures that emerge at crucial moments. On one of these occasions, while walking along an avenue where skyscrapers jutted menacingly against the foggy sky, Miguel meets an elderly man who, with a deep look and a voice choked with melancholy, reveals that he has gone through similar ordeals. His words echo as a warning, and at the same time, as a balm for the soul thirsty for answers. Every difficulty, every scar, is a door that, if opened with courage, reveals the essence of your being. Destiny challenges us so that we can rebuild and transcend ourselves. These words, loaded with an almost ancestral wisdom, ignite in Miguel's heart a tenuous flame that, even under the weight of the challenges, refuses to be extinguished. When he encounters these challenges, the young man is forced to revisit old wounds and confront the demons that insisted on haunting him. Those who, fueled by pain and loss, tried to turn his faith into ashes. On long, solitary walks in the rain, where every drop seemed to wash away not only the dust of the streets, but also the marks of shyness and despair, Miguel rediscovers the strength that lies in vulnerability. He learns that the true confrontation with the trials of destiny does not lie in brute force, but in the courage to face one's weaknesses and, with them, find a path of redemption. On an afternoon when the wind was blowing rigorously and the city seemed to have turned into a silent battlefield, Miguel was faced with a crucial choice: give in to the temptation to lose himself in bitterness, or rise up, even if hesitantly, to face the challenges with an open heart. Upon entering an old library where the whispers of books and the unmistakable aroma of aged paper filled the room, he spent hours on end leafing through records of human history, discovering that every civilization, even the most shaken, found in its trials the motivation to overcome and reinvent itself. This immersion led him to understand that, like the victorious pages of the ancients, his own history should record not failure, but triumph over adversity. During this period, the intense internal conflicts turned into deep dialogues with his own consciousness. Sitting in an abandoned park, where nature struggled to impose itself between ruins and modernity, Miguel allowed himself to cry, expressing the full weight of his fears without reservation. In this act of venting, he discovered that the pain shared with himself and, through it, with the divine, was a door to reconciliation with his own being. From that moment on, each test became a conductor, conducting a symphony of emotions that instigated him to break barriers and grow. The trials of fate, which at first glance seemed insurmountable threats, began to reveal their transformative nature. As he confronted adversity with a new perspective, Miguel felt that each obstacle was actually a lesson wrapped up in everyday challenges. He learned that true strength is not in the absence of fear, but in the ability to fight, to reinvent oneself, and to allow, in the midst of chaos, an inner light to shine again with renewed intensity. Thus, in that decisive confrontation, Miguel realized that the challenges posed by fate were, in fact, shaping the contour of his soul, making him not only a survivor, but a being capable of transcending and inspiring those around him. Every tear, every sweat shed in the internal battle was transformed into a testimony of resilience and faith that, even shaken, is remade with renewed hope. This deep clash between light and shadows, between wanting and fearing, sealed the continuous journey of self-knowledge, making the seed of transformation take root deep in her heart, even in the darkest trials. In a corner away from the uninterrupted hustle and bustle of the city, where the vertigo of skyscrapers gives way to the immensity of green and the serene singing of birds, Miguel finds a natural sanctuary that seemed to have been carefully preserved by time. Leaving behind the busy streets and the echoes of daily conflicts, he enters a trail lined with centuries-old trees whose intertwined canopies form a grandiose canopy that filters the light into dancing beams. Each step on this path presents itself as an opening to the unknown, where nature reveals itself as the purest temple of existence. The ambiance is made up of a constant murmur, the sound of water flowing down a stream carved between the rocks, and the soft whisper of the wind caressing the leaves. As he walks, Miguel feels the freshness of the dew and the earthy perfume that emanates from the moist soil, as if each element had the ability to witness the story of life. There, nature is not just landscape, but a living being that breathes, cries, and celebrates in its ancestral rhythm. It is in this scenario that the young person realizes that, by detaching himself from his ties and demonstrating a true openness of spirit, He can capture the essence of the sacred that invades all the elements of creation. As he follows the trail, he comes across an astonishing clearing, where sunlight pours out in an explosion of color, illuminating a field filled with wildflowers. Each petal, with its shades of yellow, purple, and white, seems to reveal the poetry of a universe that speaks through silence and beauty. Miguel sits on a smooth stone, feeling the cold and firm texture that connects him with the ancestry of that space and allows his thoughts to wander. At that moment, the sacred manifests itself in a delicate way. There are no artificial altars or forced symbols, only the pure manifestation of life in its most authentic and primitive state. Listening to the singing of the birds, which alternates with the sound of the leaves moving, Miguel understands that that meeting is, above all, a silent dialogue between his soul and the cosmos. He remembers stories from his childhood, when he daydreamed about adventures in enchanted forests and believed that the secrets of the universe were hidden in the nuances of every breeze. Now, at that very moment, he feels that all his doubts and fears dissolve in the immensity of the natural space. Every note of the bird song, every trail of light that projects itself through the trees, becomes a reminder that the sacred dwells in the simplest and, at the same time, deepest details. As the sun approaches the zenith, the heat intensifies, and the light seems to highlight everything with an almost mystical realism. Miguel gets up and walks to an imposing oak tree whose massive presence makes him reverent. He rests his hand on the wrinkled torso, feeling the textures that tell stories of past eras, and closes his eyes to listen to his own breathing and the intense pulse of life that surrounds him. At that moment, an overwhelming feeling of connection floods him. He realizes that he is not alone, but is part of an invisible network of energy that unites all living beings. It is as if the oak tree itself, silent witness to countless seasons, shared with him the wisdom that all existence is interdependent and sacred. The scenario expands when Miguel sees a small crystalline lake, surrounded by stones that seem to float in a brief instant of eternity. There, the surface of the water reflects the vastness of the sky and the outline of the trees, creating a living painting that dialogues with the spirit of the observer. Each moment in front of that natural mirror is an invitation to introspection and meditation on the cycle of life, losses, and new beginnings. By observing the subtle dance of the undulations, Miguel feels reconnected with the divine, as if each drop of water were a reminder of the eternal mysteries that permeate the universe. More than finding a place of physical rest, the encounter with nature inaugurates for Miguel a true spiritual rebirth. There, the sacred is not presented in an imposing or distant way, but is revealed in an intimate and welcoming way, inviting you to abandon the pains of the past and to find in every breath of wind and in every ray of sunshine the certainty that life, in its purest form, is a miracle. This communion with the natural environment instigates in him a profound transformation, where fear and doubt give way to serenity and renewed faith, which are propagated in every cell of his being. Thus, in that magical corner, Miguel understands that nature is the greatest altar of all, a space where the sacred is present without artifice, revealing the beauty of the universe and the greatness of an existence, connected with all forms of life. The encounter with this natural sanctuary is not only a refuge, but the rediscovery of its essence, the rekindling of the inner flame, and the certainty that, in the midst of all the complexity of the world, there is always a place where the soul can rest and renew itself in communion with the divine. In an instant that seemed suspended between dream and reality, Miguel is faced with the dawn of a new inner dimension. After so many journeys between encounters, challenges, and reconciliations, he reaches a point where his own existence summons a profound awakening of consciousness. Sitting on a stone bench on the edge of a serene lake, he watches the ripples that spread out in almost mystical spirals, each carrying ancestral secrets and reflections of the emotions that pulsated within him. In this silent moment, the surrounding nature becomes a mirror of the soul. The soft murmur of the water, the whisper of the wind on the leaves, the faint glow of a sun that rises timidly among the trees. Everything invites a total immersion in the essence of the being. Miguel closes his eyes and allows his thoughts to become like small sparks of light, flickering in the vastness of his mind. He feels the intensity of each beat of his heart, which echoes like a rhythmic drum, marking the rhythm of a new cycle. It is at this very moment that he perceives the convergence of the paths traveled, from the beginnings of his doubts and sufferings to the conquests and rediscoveries in nature and in human encounters. Each experience, no matter how painful or sublime, becomes a teaching that prepared you for this transcendental awakening. His eyes open to a clarity he never imagined he had. The memories that were once shrouded in shadows now shine with their own coloring, revealing the importance of each step taken, each tear shed, and each smile shared. Miguel realizes that in order to transcend the limits of his own being, one must accept both, the lights and the darkness that have shaped him. This realization settles in your heart as a renewing flame, urging you to integrate every aspect of your existence and to recognize the interdependence of all events. As the gentle breeze caresses his face, he feels a comforting, subtle, inexplicable presence that seems to echo the very voice of the universe. This intuitive energy pushes you to connect with your deepest essence, where the wisdom accumulated not only in books or prayers resides, but in the intense experience of each experience. The revelation that every choice, every setback, and every triumph are indispensable pieces in the great tapestry of life makes Miguel embrace his journey with gratitude and courage. In that moment of epiphany, he understands that the awakening of consciousness is not only an end in itself, but the beginning of a new internal era where past and future come together to forge a present full of possibilities. Thus, he decides to follow a path where the art of meditation, the study of nature, and the practice of empathy converge for a total integration of body, mind, and spirit. He gets up, inspired, and walks towards a destiny that he himself builds, with the certainty that inner transformation is a continuous and vital journey for the full realization of the human being. With each step, Michael feels the lightness of the soul and the intensity of a new purpose pulsating within him, proclaiming that true evolution lies in the ability to awaken to the infinity of love and light that dwells in each of us. At the apex of this second part, Miguel finds himself at a crossroads that questions not only his destiny, but the very nature of his commitment to the faith. In a setting loaded with symbolism, an ancient bridge illuminated by city lights and shadows that dissipate at dawn, the protagonist is challenged to make a choice that can reconfigure his entire existence. The internal dialogues and carefully constructed images transport the viewer to a state of suspense and expectation. What will be the path he will choose? This crossroads represents not only a fork in the road, but the moment when courage and faith come together to define the future. The tension is palpable, accompanied by a heart-pounding soundtrack that sets the stage for the final reveal. Michael, with his soul exposed and his eyes shining with conviction, understands that this is the time to assume his role in the great divine narrative, regardless of the risks and uncertainties that await him. At the conclusion of this second part, the narrative reaches its climax. In an environment where past, present, and future converge, Miguel is faced with the great truth that was hidden in every beat of the song, God Only God. In deeply moving scenes, where light invades darkness and every gesture is loaded with meaning, he experiences the peak of his transformation. In this culminating moment, the revelation becomes clear. Life is an eternal cycle of challenges and overcoming, but it is in unshakable faith and sincere surrender that true meaning is found. The symbology intensifies with images of the open sky, the invisible but striking presence of God, and a multitude of faces that reflect hope. The climax not only closes a stage, but also inaugurates a new chapter, where all doubts, pains, and struggles are transformed into a powerful testimony of redemption. And to end with impact, the narrative leaves a catchphrase that echoes like a mantra. When faith is our compass, the impossible becomes our path. Thus, this script says goodbye with a concise summary of Miguel's transformed soul, a story of challenges, new beginnings, and the unshakable certainty that, regardless of the shadows, God remains the guide and light in every journey. This story, built in two vigorous and intensely emotional acts, invites the viewer to understand that true transformation comes when one embraces faith and allows difficulties to be the fertile ground for inner growth. Michael, with his trials and overcomings, exemplifies that, even in adversity, the divine presence is capable of transforming the darkest of moments into a light that transcends and renews the soul. May this narrative inspire not only deep reflection, but also action, the search for greater meaning, and the courage to face life with an eye on what is eternal. God Only God is not just a song. It is a hymn to each breath, to each challenge overcome, and to each new beginning. That by watching this video, you feel invited to look inside yourself, find strength in faith, and above all, remember that where there is love and dedication, the divine is always present.